welcome to today's webcast, AI Agents and Capital Programs from Pilots to Real Work in State and Local Government. I'm Joe Morris, Chief Innovation Officer with 𝗙𝗏, and I'm excited to serve as the host for today's webcast. First, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be in for a great session over the next hour, and we're actually going to keep it very interactive. So we've got some polls for you too, so strap in. We're going to dive in real deep. But before we dive in, a little bit of housekeeping for you. You're going to see us pop up on your screen now. Some notes, just letting you know that we're going to email you a recording of this presentation within 48 hours. You can use that recording for your reference, or you can feel free to pass it along to any of your colleagues, and you can do so by using the share widget in the console menu. Joining me for this conversation and this topic today are Dr. Alan Shark, a senior fellow with the Center for Digital Government, and Mike Tooley, the Vice President of Industry Strategy for Aurigo Software Technologies. So before we dive into the content, we actually want to engage you. So we're going to have a poll pop up on the screen here in a moment. And just want to kind of level set. You're going to hear a lot about AI pilots. You're going to hear about proof of concept. You're going to hear a lot about experimentation. We want to hear from where you're at. So where is your agency today when it comes to using AI for your capital program delivery? Think enterprise systems. Think delivery of programs. Are you exploring potential use cases and learning what's possible? Are you currently testing through pilots? Or maybe you're doing some AI use in limited projects. Are you using AI tools already to support specific workflows? Are you evaluating deploying AI agents that can make and take action on tasks? Or maybe you're all the way already scaling AI across multiple teams and programs. So we're going to give you a moment to engage that poll and allow us to get a foundation to know where you are as an audience in terms of your activities related to AI and AI agents. Take a moment to engage with that poll, and then we'll take a look at the results. I know Alan and Mike, I'm excited to see kind of where the audience is at, and maybe that will help you guide the rest of the conversation today. So why don't we take a look at the results if we can? All right, and we are heavily in the exploration phase, and Alan. Maybe I'll get you to react to that off the top, but I know you've argued now for a while, governments aren't struggling because the tech isn't ready. They're struggling because they're unable maybe to move beyond some of those successful pilots. And maybe you can kind of talk to us about why government's finding it hard to cross that gap between experimentation and implementation. Obviously, right now, we've got an audience that's very much in the exploration phase. You got some that they're absolutely testing, and those that are already using AI in some specific workflows, and but a lot of evaluation exploration going on. So maybe you can get us kick us off here with some initial response and perspective.
Well, thanks, Joe. You know, there seems to be a feeling that nothing's happening beyond the pilot, and that is the buzz all over the place. It's causing frustration for government employees. It's causing frustration for the vendor community. It's like, why aren't we moving? But there's a certain backdrop that I think is worth noting, and that is, it's not like nothing's happening. The more I talk to folks, people are using AI. They're using agents, they're using it, but they're using it either under the radar, or they're using it for personal use or professional use, but again, not enterprise-wide. So there seems to be an enormous growth. Many people are afraid to admit it because of fear of running against their own policies or guidance or governance. But when it comes to this subtle shift between merely having chats to agents, this is a big leap because we're expecting more out of AI. So we take government as being a risk-adverse kind of universe to begin with, and then we have some headwinds where we have a number of issues that are causing people to become a little bit more cautious. The public's hearing a lot of bad press. We heard a lot about people booing speakers at commencement exercises when they even mentioned the word AI. So suddenly there is this sense of caution that is added to an already risk-adverse environment. It frustrates me because I see so many wonderful opportunities with AI, but the reality is people are being very skittish, but to your point, it is not a technical issue. It is a leadership issue, and I'm sure we'll get more into that as we progress into this discussion.
No, I love that. I think that as much as things change, they stay the same. So we've gone through shadow IT to shadow apps, and I think you just kind of talked about shadow AI. But as
Correct.
somebody who kind of catalogs AI deployments here at the Center for Digital Government, I can tell you we're seeing tremendous activity across the national landscape. And that begs the question, what's changed over the last 12 to 18 months? We've seen successful AI deployments. We've seen positive results in many places. It feels like momentum maybe building, but it's also slowing in some cases. But what are you seeing, Alan?
I'm just seeing greater caution. That's all. I mean, I just see people that were all, set to go forward and charge ahead, are finding that the political support that they thought they had, or the financial support that they thought they had, may not be as strong as they had thought when they first began the planning process. Number two, you mentioned this, there seems to be confusion between what is a pilot project and what is a proof of concept. And they really are quite different. If you have really sound plans for a rollout of a particular solution that will solve a problem, whether it be citizen facing or for better internal operations, usually when it comes to any other kind of technology rollout, you have a plan, you test it, that's a pilot. And then after you get the results, because you had strong KPIs, then you're based on that information, you refine it and you move ahead. That's not what's happening. At least there seems to be a little bit more friction. And that, to me, I find worrisome.
Now, Mike, you're flying around the country, you're working directly with agencies that are managing these capital programs. Are you seeing the same hesitation? What are these agency leaders telling you when they explain why maybe they're not moving faster?
Well, you're exactly right. I appreciate Alan's comments, and really the words that you said about what happened in the last 12 to 18 months is really the key, right? Because it has changed so much. This is not a new conversation. AI in government and government infrastructure delivery has been there for quite a while, right? But what it was 18, 24 months ago was a chatbot layered on top of other systems. Pretty easy to understand, didn't really change things much, helped the public-facing side of the equation, mainly in, public involvement, which is very important. But what's different now and what has really changed is the evolution of AI to become agents that are actually starting to do work inside those systems and not just sitting alongside of them. And that shift is from going to the speed of sound to the speed of light. And government is not really set up to react as quickly as we would hope in that kind of a situation, because they do have a very strong avoidance of failure, or concerns that they don't want to be on the bleeding edge. Cutting edge is fine, but let somebody else figure this out, and then we'll deploy it. And so, but when it changes as fast as it is, then nobody really gets to that point, and it causes all sorts of political and financial and internal issues. And I think that's what the problem is. We need leadership that is willing to bet on this AI wave and take government forward.
Well, I'm going to come back to you, Mike, in a second. You can both weigh in. But Alan, I mean, you just heard Mike kind of talk about the leadership dynamic. Do you view that that's the biggest obstacle today? Or do you think it's tech? Do you think it's workforce? Do you think it's public perception? If you had to rank the barriers, what would be the top barrier on your list?
I would say leadership. Tech has gone through a couple of phases. Coming out of COVID, I think they were looked upon as heroes. Anything they asked for, they got, and for good reason. They helped support a major shift from on-premise to a remote environment. But that's lost a lot of its luster. AI has kind of crept in, and as Mike mentions, I mean, there just seems to be this overriding fear or concern. They were happy with the chatbots, and they still are. They're doing amazingly well. And maybe we shouldn't use the word agentic AI. I've kind of played with the thought as I talk to many government leaders, maybe just talk about it as IT modernization, workflow improvement, use some softer words, because it seems that agentic AI, for those in the know, suddenly it sets off some alarm bells. Didn't help that about a month ago, we had one company in the private sector that relied very much on an agent that went rogue, basically erasing all the data for that company. And making it worse is that the agent apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, I deviated from my script and instructions." That's kind of scary. And that made, the press all around. And I hear people still buzzing about that. How could that happen? Well, it turns out that they didn't have enough strict rules built into it. There was some human failure. Again, the technology works, but it has to have clear-cut instructions. And I think, again, the leadership at the highest levels are becoming even more risk adverse, sensing the possibility the public may be shifting and providing, less overt support. That doesn't mean they shouldn't stop. I think there are strategies that I can think of that would help jumpstart things. And some governments are doing that. They're meeting with the public. They're showing them how to move forward. They're showing them the advantages. And I think we've got to focus on the advantages of what these systems can do, be able to improve government efficiency, which has always been a goal, but even more dramatically with the appropriate use of agentic AI. So to me, we've got some more selling to do as a profession, as an industry, more demonstrations, and bring people along and assure them that we know what we're doing, and that if something was to go wrong, that we have ways in which we can immediately interject ourselves and correct whatever it is that may be an output that is less than desirable.
And Mike, you mentioned leadership earlier. I mean, when you look at the barriers, it sounds like that was firmly your top one that you identified, but are there others?
Oh, well, one of the barriers is, as even though the AI revolution occurs and things are changing at such a rapid rate, it's also changing in public agencies, right? Agency administrators have been trying to run ahead of this gray wave for more than a decade. And when you start losing that institutional knowledge that walks out the door, then you become more reliant, I think, on systems that may be able to cover for those folks that leave. The problem is who are the folks guiding those agents? Who are the ones that put the I guess the institutional knowledge into them before they left? Did anybody? What's the quality and source of the data that these are working on? And the real, I guess, solution to that, besides leadership, is continuing to have humans in the loop. I would never advocate for something that would run a entire capital program autonomously, because AI, while it's a great tool, has never used a roundabout, has never had to deal with the speed limit sign or sometimes the crazy behavior of drivers on a highway. So while it's all very useful and a great tool, I mean, you still need humans in the loop, bottom line. And that requires not only adequate and informed staffing, but leadership.
You're right. I hear a lot of governments across the country also starting to use humans in the lead, and still leveraging the agents, but keeping the staff and leadership in the rightful spot. And I think that aligns a lot to what you just said. And I want to shift gears a little bit, because I think when we talk about AI, then we talk about agents, it feels futuristic. It feels hard to wrap your heads around. I think, Alan, you hit on something earlier, like people kind of conflate like chatbots with agents, right? And there's the things we have to demystify a little bit. And I want to maybe give you the opportunity, and Mike, you can kick us off, to make it practical. Where are some of the specific tasks, specifically in capital planning, in that project delivery, in those infrastructure management projects that you were just talking about, where agents can or are taking on today? Where are you seeing that impact?
Right, and it's really important to select that, right, properly, and it's really up to the individual agencies. But where I think it would be more effective is in an area that's got a high volume of work with data-rich access processes that are well documented, but you just don't have the people or the time to deal with all the data and the processes, right? So document management would be one. One other place I would look for, at least in terms of capital programs, is bid estimation, right? Because you have a lot of historical data on bid estimation, and I can tell, having been supervision board at one time, one of their biggest frustrations is, why can't you ever nail an engineer's estimate? Well, it's because the data is always changing, but in reality, the historical data is there, and AI could probably sift through that faster and give you different, not necessarily better, but give you other options from which you could choose, and you will probably nail down that estimate much closer. So again, I guess to summarize that is what do you do a lot of that doesn't really change day to day, but you don't have the people to manage it. That's where an agent can come in and then have the answers ready for the people that did, that do have to deliver this with half the staff that they used to have.
I appreciate that. I want to keep diving in, but I want to pause here for a second, because I think we have another opportunity to hear from our audience. And if we can bring up the next poll question, kind of maybe hear from you. What's your experience in terms of AI agents? You're not familiar at all with AI agents yet. You're learning how AI agents differ from traditional AI tools. Maybe, just like earlier, you're exploring potential use cases. Maybe a handful of you've already got some pilots in specific areas or functions of your business, and or hey, we've already done it. We're seeing measurable results, and we're pretty happy. So we'll give you a second there, and I think understanding that, Mike, would help you maybe answer the next question, which is, where do you think governments are leaving the most value on the table? You just kind of gave us a little bit of that, but where is some of that low-hanging fruit that, if you were running an agency tomorrow, that you would have the confidence to move on right away, that you'd tackle them? We'll give it another maybe 10 seconds or so to let the audience engage with the poll. We'll take a look at those results, and then you can answer that. Hey, if I was in the seat tomorrow, where would I look first? So let's take a look at those poll results. All right, we got a little split here, gentlemen. We've got 30% or so that are not familiar with AI agents yet. We've got another 25% or more that are looking on how AI agents differ from traditional AI tools. So I want you to keep that in mind as we walk through the rest of the conversation, and we've got some pilots and some exploration again. So, Mike, in terms of that leaving room on the table, maybe I'm going to add a little bit more to that initial question. If you've got people on the call today that are not familiar, what would you want them to know that they may not know? And if you were in their shoes, where would you look first?
I appreciate it. And I love this poll, really. I mean, because people are using or looking or thinking about using AI in their work. And even if you're not familiar, you're thinking about it, right? And that's really incredible. So where would I start if I were running an agency today? What would I look at first? And again, I'd go back to what takes the most time, and really therefore takes the most effort. I'd want to tackle as much of the mundane as possible and use the individuals that were assigned to that type of work to do higher level work, frankly. That would be the first thing I'd do. And why would I do that? Is because, having been the leader of a public agency in this day and age, I can tell you that the appropriators, they used to just want to trust that you were going to deliver projects, which we did. That's not been the problem. But now they want the return on investment. They want to know exactly how did that change a community. And yes, you could see it, but they want to quantify it now. So for years, the public has been asking government to be run more like a business, frankly, and their elected officials have taken up that call. And you see it especially in the federal space right now, that you're expected to return some kind of something, not just a project, but I guess a metric of what changed for the better. And that's something new. And frankly, that's difficult for public agencies to do, but that's something that AI can help you quantify.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that process efficiency audit is a helpful step, right? Identify where the biggest pain is or those repetitive tasks, and then look at it through that lens. Alan, there's another lens though. There's different constituencies. So there's what you might be comfortable with as a frontline government worker, and then there's what I, as a resident, will be comfortable government doing with AI, and then there's maybe you as a business owner and what you'd want government to do. And government's got to look at it through all of those lenses. And I think when you look at the various use cases that could exist, which ones do you think government employees are going to wrap their arms around versus those residents and business owners and what they're going to embrace? And or maybe take it a different way, which areas do you think are going to trigger resistance?
Well, let's start with the positive. And I think, to me, and I hate to use this overused phrase, the low-hanging fruit. To me, when it comes to citizens, you want citizen-facing communications. And one of the, if you look at some of the surveys that have been taken over the years, folks are frustrated that they can only call between certain times of the day. Very often, call centers are not operational or not fully staffed or staffed at all over weekends, at night. We have an increasingly mobile society that expects instant access, as we do with the business community. So here, AI has shined and grown. You know, the first automated response systems started with clearly predetermined rationale for any given question. And if it couldn't answer one of 5 questions, it would turn it over to a human automatically. So they were canned speeches. And then voice recognition technology became better. And we moved from text to voice, although both are still used today. And now the word agentic is kind of creeping into that in some very clever ways. It's one thing to ask a question and then it comes back to you with an answer. And it's one thing to have an answer that's predetermined. But now we're finding that some of these so-called predetermined are able to go beyond the predetermined. Based on the information and data that they have access to, an agentic of AI, when it comes to a chatbot handling citizen inquiries, whether it be a modified 311 system or equivalent, can now suddenly say, oh, Mrs. Jones, I appreciate the opportunity to serve you in filling out this form or going over the requirements for this particular benefit program. But in reviewing your records, I want to point out that you're also eligible for this, this, and this. Have you considered that? Now, this is something quite different. This, in many cases, even humans don't do this. So this would be a great way to win over more of the public by showing them the positive things that an AI agent could do, meaning beyond the initial question, being able to sense what it is that person is really asking for. Sometimes people call and they ask for something, and the original systems or the older systems would give them only that. But sometimes people are not sure what they're asking, or they think they know and don't. This is where AI can help clarify by better understanding what people are looking for in any given situation. So, short answer, citizen-facing communications can really build trust when things work. You talked about what would cause harm. It would be if they don't give good information, or if there isn't a way to turn over a call to a human if they become frustrated. I always say to folks in the field, make sure you have a disclaimer. Don't try to be too human. Maybe instill a little humor in there, like, yes, I can switch you to a human, but it won't be till Monday until you get an answer. Things like that. But you want to make it real. You want to make it authentic, but you also want to let people know that humans are there to jump in if there's ever a problem. When you don't have that remedy, you don't have the disclosure, you can cause a lot of harm. But if you do these things correctly, it'll make it easier for some of the other less visible AI type applications.
I appreciate that. I'm really enjoying not just your insights, but the poll questions and the back and forth with the audience. We actually have another poll question for you. And you just heard from Alan and Mike on where they think the biggest opportunities are. We want to hear where you think the biggest opportunities are. Now let's hold each other accountable here a little bit. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for AI is in your capital programs over the next year? Is it in reducing those administrative workloads and manual reportings that both our speakers have talked about? Maybe it's more specific. Maybe you want to get into the project planning and forecasting and estimating, and you view that, hey, AI might be helpful there. Can it accelerate our decision making? Maybe it can provide those better insights, maybe what Alan was kind of alluding to. Every single poll that we run at the Center for Digital Government and the Center for Digital Education comes back to workforce and staff shortages. And I joke that if you pulled 10 CIOs in a room, it's always coming back to workforce. So maybe that's the lens that you're going to look at it through. Or maybe because based on the earlier polls, everyone's still looking at this and kind of trying to wrap their arms around it. You're still wrapping your arms around it and looking to figure out still where AI can provide value. So we'll give you a second to engage with that poll. And after that, I'd like to double click into that overcoming the trust and the resistance, because that's a real deal thing. Alan, you talked about it earlier. You know, you can have 400, 500, 800 great projects that are going well across the country, but the thing that can make the news sometimes is the project that went awry. So I want to also spend some time talking about how you can build trust, how you can overcome that resistance, internal and external. But before we get there, I wanted to give our audience a chance to kind of weigh in after everything they've heard. Where do they see the biggest opportunities? So maybe we can take a look at those results now. All right, gentlemen. So here you go. Here's what the audience thinks. I mean, you've got almost 34% saying reducing administrative workload and manual reporting. I bet you, if we had to guess, we probably would have put that at the top of the list. I think that's where we see a lot. But 25% saying project planning, forecasting, and estimating, and then a mix. I mean, over 20% still determining where AI can provide value. So maybe before we jump into the next section, any reactions to the poll results here? And Mike, I'll put you on the spot first.
Yeah, no, thanks for putting me on the spot first. It's pretty much what I've heard, right, from public infrastructure owners and others, those top two. The third one, though, I think is really interesting, accelerating decision-making with better insights. We're not, well, actually, we're there. I mean, the world today, if you had an AI agent that was constantly reviewing your data every day and every night, for example, but what if you had two AI agents, for example, a fiscal AI agent communicating with a risk management AI agent, and you come in the morning, turn on your computer, and you have insights into your portfolio, the red, amber, green every morning, and it can tell you exactly where you should probably focus to make, it'll bring you into the loop where you could say, hey, this project in this area needs some special attention. And by the way, here's some potential mitigations. We are there today. And I know that's quite a bit ahead of where a lot of folks are thinking, but it's real. And so that goes down to the bottom of the poll where can AI provide value? Basically, it can augment your effectiveness. And when AI first came out, the term came out, I started thinking of it more, instead of artificial intelligence, it's more like augmented human intelligence. That's where it's most effective. And it can help you make better decisions with better insights, frankly, and faster. So it's an exciting time.
That's great. Alan, I know something that you follow closely and we talk a lot about is trust. I mean, we've seen the Edelman Trust surveys year after year. We see the trust in government. Everyone on today's event is focused on the trust that their organization maintains with the public and their constituency. When we look at it through the lens of AI, a point that stood out so far in our conversation is that it's often easy to lump every AI application into one giant category. Mentally, we don't even think about that an agent is different than a chatbot, right? But when you look at it that way, or people tend to look at it that way, how can that view hurt governments that are actively trying to deploy useful tools that people generally or broadly could support?
Yeah. There's so many flavors of AI. I've heard some very well-educated people talk about the AI, and it bothers me because there is no such thing as the AI. There are many flavors, many permutations, many different offerings, and that's going to increase. So I think what is at risk to tout the word AI too much because it sets off alarm bells unnecessarily. Mike mentioned, getting better data to make better decisions, and that played out in the previous poll. That comes back to something called, the dashboard. Everybody loves a dashboard. But I've talked to many CIOs and others that say, they look nice, they have all these different colors, but very often the data that has supported them in the past have been the weakest link. In other words, they look good. Managers seem to like it because they can take a look at their desk and see where things are. But if you suddenly have an AI agent, as Mike described, kind of coming up with that data, now suddenly those dashboards make far more sense. You have more accurate information. In the end, I don't think the public cares whether a government uses AI or not, unless they believe that there's a risk in releasing confidential information, personally identifiable information. They just want government to be efficient and accessible. And I think we've got to focus on that and not just throw out AI. We, those on this call, this webcast, we want to use that term, but there's a time when we use it internally like we are here, and there's a time in which we use it to sell what are the benefits, what are these new systems trying to do. We've been improving year after year, and yes, there's greater pressure as always to be quote unquote more business minded. I think we are. AI is going to help us get there through all its permutations, whether it be the chat side or the agentic side, doesn't matter. Whatever gets us to that moment of efficiency that helps make us as public employees, and I am a public employee, I'm a professor at a university, I know what that's expect. They expect more and more productivity. I think we can do that with machines. And we're not going to be talking about this today, I don't think. That is the next thing we'll be talking about a year from now is the merger of agentic AI and robotics. This growth of humanoids, but that's another discussion entirely. But I think, again, just to sum, we need to move ahead and modernize government. However that takes place, it's got to be done in a responsible manner. We believe that AI is a wonderful, fantastic way to get there because much of what we do has to do with data. And if the data quality is there, which is a big if, although I think people are far more aware that that is the foundation of successful AI deployments, then we're able to get more out of it to make better decisions, more predictive analytics, and make things far more efficient where the public will be happy.
I want to pull the thread on that just a tiny bit. So you have these stakeholders. If you were today, Alan, you were a city manager, you were a CIO, you were a program leader, and maybe you're facing some of that pressure, that skepticism about AI. What conversations should you or would you have with your residents, your constituents today?
This is what I'm hearing when I talk to CIOs. What they're doing, especially at the local city and county level, is anticipating some resistance when they start talking about using AI. And what they're doing is they're just having town hall meetings. They're having informational meetings. They'll bring their vendor along. And usually when you talk about AI, we're not talking about transforming government overnight where everything is going to be AI empowered. Usually it starts with a particular application or two or three. It could be something that is housed in public safety or public works, or in public health, whatever it is. Usually it is at the department level. And so you find the constituents within the public that perhaps might be most impacted. And you can do it a couple of ways, an open meeting, or you can actually have invitational only focus group to bring those people in who are the stakeholders of any given particular program. And bringing those people in give you an opportunity to explain how you intend to improve a system, what they need to know, and have them ask all the questions they want to kind of give them a sense of confidence. You will learn by their questions, and they will learn by your answers. And hopefully, if it is a well thought out system, you can have a pilot to start with the idea that that's not going to be the end point. The goal should be a full rollout, not just to sit there in a holding pattern, wondering what to do next. If there is a good plan with good vision and you have the proper support, both financially and politically, the pilot is just the way to get to the next step, not an end to itself. You should continue to move on based on data that you get from that, what the pilot informs you. And if all the information lines up with your KPIs that you figured out in advance, you should be able to proceed.
Mike, one concern that comes up, I mean, every conversation I have is, what does it mean to the government employee? Whether that's job loss, reskilling, upskilling. When you're talking to government employees, how do you explain the role of these agents without creating anxiety or easing the anxiety?
Yeah, that's a really fair question. I mean, you don't have to go too far to find a news story about 10,000 layoffs from Amazon, or, pick the IT company, right? And when you start speaking about AI and agentic AI in the public space, that's one place the mind runs to is, am I going to be replaced by this? And the short answer is no, because you still need that judgment. You need that education. You just need that ability to reason with the data that you see. Where the agents can help is get you to that place quicker, right? In my opinion. But how you can use them, would you be upskilled? Absolutely. I mean, through the use of AI, there's an upskill, right? Your ability to learn will be accelerated. Your ability to get work done will be accelerated. I think those are both upskill factors that are often overlooked in the use of AI, and it's actually quite helpful.
One of the things that we've used, I think it's come up at least once or twice on the webinar today, but it's this concept of human in the loop, right? I think I even mentioned that I'm starting to see people pivot to human in the lead. But both those terms don't really mean much to the average resident or even to maybe the employee. How would each of you explain kind of the role of human oversight in a way that is accurate but builds confidence in terms of the value of the public sector employee in this new agentic world?
Yeah, I'll take a run at that first. And basically, we have to remember, whatever this is, it's a tool, right? And the person behind the keyboard has to have the skill to use the tool. That comes from basically experience that AI won't have, knowledge, personal knowledge that AI won't have. You've got to know what you're doing in order to use this tool. And that's why I think human in the loop or human in the lead is very important. And again, why I don't think humans will be replaced. Delivery, they'll be made better, frankly, is my point of view.
Yeah, I would just add that I would just show them a picture of a government worker with his hand on the plug. So I think people need to be assured that there's somebody there that can pull the plug if something goes wrong. That's extreme. But more than that, I think the public needs an assurance that there's ongoing auditing. That to me is an important selling point and a good management tool, meaning that if you're having output in any one of the things that we've already mentioned, that there is a system could be AI, of course, that is looking at the quality of the outputs at all times, whether at all times or on a sampling basis, depending upon volume. We've got to be realistic here, but that you do have a system that is checking, as opposed to we built a system and now we're on to other things. We are intimately involved with our systems because we want the public to know that you can never delegate authority and responsibility. You can't just blame the vendor. I mean, it could be the vendor, but that's not going to work. The public holds us responsible. And people have learned over and over the hard way is we are responsible for every single output. And we've got to let them know that we know that, we recognize that, and we have taken steps to either pull a plug or to immediately sample so we know the quality of outputs at any given time, and that we have the ability to take immediate corrective action. And if the system had to be shut down, we have a plan B.
Yeah. I want to shift this slightly. I mean, I think we've talked a tremendous amount about the rollout and what's needed and where the targets are. But now I want to get into practically, like, how do we move beyond the pilot? Alan, you talked about there needs to be a middle ground between the small pilot and enterprise-wide deployment. You could spend a minute or two talking to us about what does that really look like in practice?
Well, I'm afraid that most of the pilots I'm hearing about that give us heartburn are really, in the end, when you kind of dissect it, are more proof of concept than they are pilots. And I think we've got to get honest about what the differences are, and they both have certain reasons for existing. If I had a pilot, again, the ideal pilot, it's like building a building. It takes longer in some cases to plan a building than to build a building, because it is so important to have the correct foundational elements in place, hence blueprints. They've got to go through all sorts of permissions. They've got to go through all this planning. You know, you can't build something and say, you know, this foundation should have been 20 feet the other direction. When it comes to developing something, a solution to modernize a particular application, to put something on steroids, to give dramatic benefits of something that didn't previously exist, requires some really good planning. And I think people are a little weak in that area, getting too excited to move too quickly. Oh, we'll learn from the pilot. That's a proof of concept. That's not a pilot. The pilot is something that should come out of an intensive planning process with milestones, timelines, whether it be a waterfall approach or an agile approach, doesn't matter. You've got to have a sense of where you're going to go. What is it that will define success? And the pilot is just a step to get you there. And a good pilot has different measures that you measure against initially established KPIs. If you don't have those key performance indicators, then how do you ever measure success? So it's like basic planning 101 that seems to be missing in some of these conversations or the confusion that this really isn't a pilot as much as a proof of concept. And if the proof of concept is all you're doing, fine, then what are you going to do afterwards after you've built up expectations? If it worked, what do you do now? You go back and you plan and you start building things out, and you'll probably wind up with a pilot. But it does require planning. Now, what's happened, though, in some cases where there have been some pilots with all the planning up front, it's kind of like the ground that they were standing on has been shaken. And it's been shaken for two things. One, the finances no longer seem to be as solid as they were. That's an issue. Or number two, the political support seems to be vanishing. And that's why we must always be careful. And I always say this to CIOs at the state and local level. Make sure you have your champions on board at all times. Don't take that championship for granted, because you can only do so much. Your champions should be the highest level people that you can possibly influence to give that positive support and active support. If you lose that, then you're in very, very shaky ground. So that's the politics of it. The technology is a lot easier. The human part is the bigger challenge, and it requires a lot more work than some people realize. And that's where I think the biggest problem lies.
I'm going to hit you, gentlemen, with some rapid fire questions before we turn to the audience questions, because they're coming in brisk. So we do, I want to make sure we have some time to get them. But Mike, one thing that we talked about in the preparation for this, and I think we see in our data and you're seeing in your conversations across the country, is probably on the time that we've been on the webinar, there's some new AI enhancement that's come out. We're all three of us are unaware of it. But what isn't happening is the governance model is keeping pace with that change. So when you look at those policy frameworks that quite haven't caught up, how can leaders make progress when that structure is lagging behind the tech?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And before I get to that, I just want to say I hope everybody listened to what Alan just said, because that is a great roadmap to a successful implementation. The tech is the easy part. It's like the tip of an iceberg. All the work is back there below that. It's this type of technology process is not about technology, it's about change management. And so now you flip forward to the policy discussion, the question you just asked me. I think we need to look at it from that perspective. Like if you're going to modernize not only an agency or a government, but the workflows, you need to stop and figure out what are you trying to accomplish? Or in the terms of policy, perhaps what are you trying to prevent? You need to determine that quickly and upfront instead of, I guess, just waiting to see what somebody else does. Make your own decisions, do your own work, take a look at what you're actually trying to accomplish, and build a policy framework that accomplishes that safely and quickly, and delivers not only good outcomes, but also does it in a way that, frankly, makes everything a lot better. So, you know, policy is often seen as a framework that keeps you from doing something, when really you should flip the script and it should be a policy that allows you to do something. And how do you get there? That's the discussion that needs to occur.
Okay. I want to get to audience questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bundle a bunch of my follow-up questions into one piece, and you guys can go whatever direction you want to go. But I want to finish with something practical. Imagine, we don't have to imagine our audience is made up of CIOs. It's made up of agency directors. It's made up of those leaders of these programs. If you, each of you, Alan and I mean, you can kick us off, and then Mike, what are your 1, 2, 3, you don't even have to have 3, but what's your practical recommendations for them to move from that experimentation to operational value? Or what's the first action that you'd recommend that they take? You can feel free to go either way on that one.
Let me jump in real quick and just say, we don't want AI chasing after a solution. I think it always comes as, what is it we're trying to solve? What is it that we're trying to improve? So if you're asking where to start, it's where's the problem? I see many people, unfortunately, look at AI as like, oh, this is going to be great. Where do we apply it beyond ourselves? And again, we are using it for personal productivity, but where do we use it within our departments and our agencies? What's the problem we're trying to solve? It may not be AI today. It could be tomorrow. And that's why many on this webcast are saying, we're exploring this, because watch what's going on with the developments, because what may not work today may be perfect for tomorrow. We just have to understand where the technology is headed. So number 2, number 1 is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Number 2, where are we with the technology, and what are those best use cases that I can get some better ideas of how it may apply to the problem which I'm trying to solve? Those are the 2 things. Boy, if you start with that, I think you can start developing your roadmap.
And I totally agree with that. Pick 2 or 3 things that you're committed to changing, 2 or 3 outcomes that are desirable for you, and make sure it's outcomes, not just outputs, right? I mean, what are we going to change for the better? What problems are we going to fix? And what effect is that going to have globally on the enterprise? I mean, those are the things that you should talk about first. Public employees are very good problem solvers, and they want to get to the solution as quickly as possible. And in doing so, sometimes they maybe just go get a tool to try and accomplish that without really realizing what the outcome might be. And so I think taking the time to determine exactly what you want to accomplish is key to a foundation for a good roadmap, a good implementation, getting away from a pilot and actually doing something.
Well, there's a ton of questions that have come in the queue, and a bunch more that I still have for you. But let me walk through some of them, and we can kind of look at that. There are questions in the queue about specific use cases and examples of what government is doing. We'll absolutely do our best to follow up with you on those and point you in the right direction in terms of those specific use cases. I know that Mike and Alan have a wealth of knowledge there. Do you both think that all of the conversation around AI and workforce, well, it may result in upskilling now. Do you think it's going to change in terms of the hiring of new employees? Do you think there's going to be a shift in that? Maybe a look to how AI can play a role before they hire, or maybe it's going to shift the roles that they hire for. What are your thoughts on how that looks going forward?
I can jump in real quick at the front.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. The front and end is going to be most impacted. I think, those who embrace AI are probably going to be fine. But I think in the coming years, I think people are going to rethink the entry-level positions. We're already seeing many of them are administrative that very well could be better handled by AI. And when people retire, I think you're going to see a less of a rush to fill those positions because people are going to become more productive. So those are the two things. So I think it's going to have an impact on the front and the end.
And I agree with that. And I can tell you, as having hired public employees, one of the things that the young are looking for are cutting edge tools, frankly. Mm-hmm. They don't want to go into a workplace that has not changed in 40 or 50 years. They want to be using the best, the newest, shiniest type thing. And so I think it's actually a good recruitment tool, in my opinion.
Well, I think that I always say, like, if you're becoming a health and human services social worker, you want to be out there making an impact. So whatever is going to allow you to have the biggest impact, and I think that applies across every vertical in space. One of the things that I think I picked up through our whole conversation is the value and importance of preserving choice. So why is it so important, Mike, question here, to make sure that residents and employees have the option to interact with the human? Even if we push all the way into AI, that the person's still going to have the front counter option, or they're going to have the chatbot option, or they're going to have the agent option. Why is that choice still so critical today in the public sector?
Well, that's basically because these are taxpayer dollars, and the taxpayer eventually wants to talk to somebody who's making the decisions. And if it's not, an agent, all the better. They definitely want to have the access to the human, who is probably the one that went to a committee hearing or whatever to ask for the appropriation to build this project, the one that's ultimately responsible, right? You cannot get rid of responsibility. And so that access to a human will not go away. And so I'll leave it there, but basically that's it. I mean, you need to have the access to the human if you need it. If you can get your question answered, your concern addressed by an agent, you're happy with that, that's great. But ultimately, there's got to be a human there to speak to at some point.
A question that came in from the audience is, a lot of the data, whether it's about AI, whether it's about data centers, frankly, probably whether it's about a lot of things, can be dated. Does leadership need a communications plan to show that AI and agents are nothing to fear, and how to wrap their arms around it? Who wants to
Short
lean into
answer,
that?
yes. Go ahead.
I mean, I wouldn't. I guess it comes back to the idea that these things that we're talking about are not universal to every application in government. So I wouldn't go out of my way, if I was a CIO or a senior manager in government, to try to be on the defensive, defending something I would be more prone, as I said earlier, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What is this new initiative? What does it look like? And maybe we mentioned that we're thinking of using some of AI tools to give us the outcomes that we all desire. I don't want to just hold this up as a separate piece that this is new, we need it. That's a very different discussion. That's for academics. That's for us to talk internally. But I think the public really doesn't care when it comes to government services. They want the human touch. They want efficiency. And if we find ways that we can modernize things by using the latest technology, then we've achieved our purpose.
So if you look at a couple of other questions coming in here, a lot of government documents can be paper-based. This question here, property title, deeds, records are stored digitally, but sometimes in old-fashioned file cabinets. Is there any movement towards solutions that are solving that problem in government today?
And I can point to one that was actually developed by the Utah DOT in terms of excess right-of-way, right? And I know they're talking about deeds and everything, but how UDOT approached it was using AI with OCR capabilities, something that could read the digital document and then digitize it from there and then make decisions or make suggestions based on that. That's real. And I see also, the safety and security of it is a concern. You definitely, if you're looking for a solution, you definitely want something that's a FedRAMP or StateRAMP, ideally both certified, has all of the security protocols behind it. We have the certifications for all of those, and just make sure it's also stored in a safe location. For example, we use the Amazon cloud for ours, but behind that is a lot of top of the line security to keep that data safe.
See, there's a question here that probably is a subject to another whole webinar, but thoughts on liability in terms of AI use in local government. But I think that's for the governance and the policies, and what both Mike and I have talked about is those steps and how critical they are. But I don't know if you had any additional thoughts on resources or insights there.
Well, I think that one thing that comes to mind is the word compliance. Any deployment for any technology, AI or not, this grew out of smart city kind of applications where compliance is important. How do we protect confidential information, personally identifiable information, financial information, health information? I think the biggest fear are twofold when it comes to the public and even employees that I've talked to. One is the system goes rogue and they lose control. I'm less worried about that, at least at the local and state government setting. But the other is, what if a system gets careless? I mean, humans are careless, systems can make mistakes. What happens if? One, can we prove that we made every attempt that should never have happened, where something was released that shouldn't have? And then are we prepared for remediation if we are found to be out of compliance? So yes, when I talk to CIOs, that's an enormous concern about, we're talking about trust in government, and from the government employee standpoint, we want trust in our technology. So trust is an important word on both ends.
And, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mike. Go for it.
Yeah, really quickly. I mean, responsibility is nothing that could be given away, right? You can't say it's the AI's fault. It comes back to a human again, right? And it's the same thing with liability. So governments that use AI need to have the governance and the security protocols set up appropriately to protect themselves.
Well, you couldn't have asked for more engagement from our audience today. I think to wrap up today's conversation, start with manageable use cases, communicate differently and often to your stakeholders, depending on who they are. Keep the humans in the loop and in the lead if need be. Scale gradually instead of that just flipping the switch and hoping for the best. Preserve that resident choice and focus on outcomes, not the technology. We're going to wrap it up here. And in closing, I'd like to just thank Mike and Alan for sharing their insight on today's webcast. Probably most importantly, thank you for your engagement throughout. But I'd also like to thank Aurigo for making today's conversation possible. What a tremendous conversation we had. Thanks to you both, gentlemen. And thanks very much for all of you spending time with us today. We look forward to seeing you again on another government technology event. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.